Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the Panorama Angle. I'm joined today by Laura Florence, Panorama Consulting Group's Director of Business Development. Laura, thank you for joining us.
Hi, this is Daniel. Thanks for having me today.
Hey, no problem. Now, I understand today we have a treat. You're going to explain to us some assessments and how they can be basically benefit with the digital strategy.
Absolutely. The question is, what is a digital strategy? Do we have one? And then what is our current state as an organization? Are we in alignment with that digital strategy?
Well, I guess the thing that we want to start out with is what exactly is a digital strategy?
Oh, that's a great question. So typically, people are thinking the digital strategy is all about the technology. It's actually buying hardware, implementing software, and the idea is to be able to access and leverage the latest, greatest in technology, innovation, and intelligence. But at Panorama, when we think about digital strategy, what we're really thinking about is more of an approach to holistically address, are we aligned as an organization in terms of the people, the process, and the technology with the goals of the organization? So digital strategy is the tool or the approach to manifest the digital transformation.
Okay, so it's more than just, I need X amount of servers.
Exactly, absolutely. It's all about how are we going to use all the tools at our disposal to achieve our goals, the mission and vision of our organization.
Okay. Now, you read a lot online, and it says that your digital strategy, which you've very well explained to us, but it needs to be aligned from the top down. What does that mean to be aligned in the digital strategy?
So, again, when you think about digital strategy, it's that three-legged stool of people, process, and technology. And in all things, as an organization, we're here to survive and thrive and to add value for our customers and our stakeholders and our shareholders. And so the first thing when you're thinking about digital strategy or you're looking at potentially taking on a digital transformation is to have exquisite clarity about who we are as an organization, what is our value proposition for our customers, and then to say, what does that interaction, what does that customer journey look like? What are the touch points of how we interact with our clients? And for the most part, nowadays, the expectation is that a lot of those touch points are going to be augmented or facilitated by technology.
So you mentioned a specific word in there. And if I kind of go back a few sentences, it was digital transformation. Is that the process of digital strategy? What's the difference between the two?
That's a great question. So if you think about digital strategy as a holistic approach of people, process, and technology to achieve the mission and vision of your organization, digital transformation is about fundamentally changing who you are as an organization and how you interact with your clients. So an example that we had was a client that has 7 storefronts and a website, but their corporate aspiration, their goal, or their desire was to be the Home Depot of the Caribbean. And so for that organization, they were truly looking to transform literally exactly how they interact with their clients. So we had to start by redefining what that customer journey looked like. And once we had established that, looking at an omni-channel retail approach, then we had to say, all right, now that we know how we want to interact with our clients, are we designed as an organization to support that customer journey? And so get clarity around that, revisit all the business processes around that. Once you have those business processes sorted out, then the question is, what's the flow of data and information through those business processes? And the very last step is really actually selecting and implementing software to manifest that digital transformation. And sometimes that digital transformation, it could be a website, it could be an ERP system, it could be a customer portal pop-out. There's a lot of different ways that you can use technology to enhance your customer journey and your customer experience. So that's really what digital transformation is all about. But it's a big term and it's a big project. When you're looking to fundamentally change who you are as an organization and how you interact with your clients, for the most part, though, and kind of back what we originally talked about was, are we as organizations in alignment with our digital strategy? And what I will say in that regard, the vast majority of my clients are not looking for a full-fledged digital transformation. They're looking to make sure that their house is in order. And so for those folks, that's where we come in and we're going to assess that three-legged stool and say, where are you with your mission and vision? Where are you in terms of your people, your business processes, and your technology, your applications, infrastructure to support the mission and vision of your organization? So it's not as big and dramatic and weighty as a digital transformation, but it's still a very significant and can be a very, very effective and impactful initiative.
Right. I was going to say, I mean, that digital transformation sounds like a lot of work that, it's not just the planning, but I mean, entire businesses could have to reorganize the way they do everything. Especially, you get a lot of those grandma and grandpa, type shops that they started in the 50s and now they're multi-million-dollar, but they still run it like it's the 1950s. I would expect that would, upheave a lot of their business. So it makes sense that a lot of companies may not want to go, full-blown digital transformation, but just make sure that, they're almost bits and pieces are up to date with how the rest of the world is working. So is there like a clear line on what you would define as who should actually do it or who shouldn't? And is it really for everybody? I think the answer is no, but how do you define the line of who needs it and who doesn't as far as digital strategy goes?
So that's a great question, and that's where the assessments really come into play. And so every company is different. Like you mentioned, maybe they've grown organically. They were a mom and pop. They started manufacturing in a garage. They've expanded and they grow, and they went from a checkbook to Excel to QuickBooks. When I'm actually describing the journey of one of our multi-gajillion-dollar clients right now. And then they moved on to Microsoft back office, and now they're ready for full-fledged proper ERP. That is a very natural journey, and that is definitely a journey where they want to take a look at how is technology going to facilitate their operations. But that particular initiative, that particular company is not looking for a true digital transformation. They're just looking for more of just the latest, greatest software to help enable the work that they need to achieve. So there really, when you think about it, is a spectrum. You've got some folks that are just looking for a tactical business project. They want to move off of QuickBooks onto ERP. And then you have clients like the one I described that are truly looking to transform. Vast majority of people are going to be looking for something kind of in the middle, more than just plugging in a new email system. They want to take that opportunity to assess where they are with their people and their processes, as well as the technology, and see what list we can find. And I think that's one of the most interesting things about what we do, is because when folks come to us and they say, hey, we want to buy some software, every single time we interact with a client, to some extent, with very, very few exceptions, the very first thing we're going to do is assess where they are. And for some clients, they may come to us and say, we want new software. We go through this assessment process and we're like, hold the horses. You don't need new software. You just need to use the software you've got in a more effective way. Or we may say, hold your horses. Your house needs to get in order. You need to sort out some of these business processes. Maybe 6 months down the road, when you've got some of this stuff figured out, then we could take a look at a selection. And then the third option is absolutely. These folks know who they are. They're very good at what they do. They just need the technology to support them. And so we can jump into that project. There's a lot of different reasons that folks come to us, but the first step is always to start with that assessment.
Okay. As far as the assessment goes, what kind of time frame? I mean, is this a huge project just for the assessment part to decide if they need to get new software, or they just need to change how they're doing business with their existing software? What kind of time frame is that typically?
So it's another really good question. And again, it really determines on what the focus of the initial project was. So if we're being brought in to do a selection, then we're going to do a proper assessment. And, that can be anywhere from 3 weeks to several months. So let's say, for example, you are a manufacturing operation in one location, you have a pretty straightforward business. We can sit down with your team, take a look at your ERP infrastructure, your landscape right now, sit down with the different functional areas, map out your business processes, do some quick assessments in terms of business readiness, and have those initial next steps in a matter of maybe a month. But if you are a multinational conglomerate and you are looking at going into a selection, that process could easily be 4 to 6 months, depending on the complexity of your business. If you have different operations, different business units, different practices, and we've got decisions to make on, let's say, for example, are you going to have shared services, or are they all going to have disparate authority and responsibility, etc. And then, of course, the third option is we are just looking for guidance. Come in here, talk to us for 2 days, give us some recommendations on where we should run, and literally that is just a matter of a couple of days. So there's a real spectrum of what an assessment can look like.
Okay. Well, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, if you're a smaller shop, obviously it wouldn't take as long. But if you were something, something huge, like say you're worldwide, you're going to have to go to all these different departments, all these different locations, even to just try and figure out what they're doing currently. That's the corporate strategy. And you said that digital transformation is how the company interacts with the customer. So what is one of the ways that we actually get that customer input? How are we optimizing it for the customer if we're only looking at it from the corporate standpoint?
Well, there's a couple different ways. So in one example is a Fortune 500 company that we worked with. They had actually contracted with Gartner to go out and interview all of their customers to get some feedback on how they were performing. And then they brought us in to then take that feedback, assess all of those B2B, business to business touch points, and give them recommendations on how to improve them. So that is one way, is that we can play well in the sandbox with companies whose focus traditionally is to be out there talking with customers. For the most part, within Panorama, we typically work more with our clients directly. We can certainly set up interviews with their customers, with our customer's customer. And for the most part, we work directly with our clients.
Okay. And you said that's for business to business. Is it the same type of process with, say, retail? So, say if your business was Home Depot, right? Would that be a company that you'd hire Panorama to come in and actually do a survey for the end people? Like, I bought a lawnmower there, right? Am I going to get a survey? Is it like that, or is it strictly business to business that you guys look at trying to optimize the most?
I would say that in terms of business processes, we will look at any business process for every functional area, for any organization out there, whether it's retail, manufacturing, distribution, professional services, healthcare, energy. We can work with any of those different areas. In terms of who are we sending assessments out to, who are we sitting down in a room and picking their brains, for the most part is going to be with our clients, whether they are a B2C business, a direct business to consumer business, or they're a business to business client of ours.
Okay. And when you're providing, I'm assuming it's going to be a report is the output. So after you're talking with the, you do your assessments, what's the end game? Like what does the company receive so that they have something to base their decision off of?
So it really depends on what the purpose was that we were brought in. So for example, let's say that we're brought in for a company that is in crisis. The first thing we're really going to do, in that case, we use the term fact finding. We're looking for what are the immediate short-term actions that a company can take to instill or to establish some stability within the organization. And so those will be recommendations, everything around financial restructuring, operational restructuring, potentially restructuring in terms of personnel assignments, etc. So in that case, we're really looking to give them some action items and recommendations within a week or two. That next phase of work is going to be that next month where you really dig into the specific steps of manifesting those recommendations. If we are brought in, let's say by a smaller company that is just looking for some guidance and then they want to go shopping on their own, they just need to know who they should be looking at. Again, we will come back to them, and it's almost like a SWOT analysis where we will give them our observations, formal and informal, around what we observe with their organization in terms of their business readiness to take on a new initiative, what we see in terms of their business processes and the pain points, and also giving them some guidance around how many of these pain points are going to be fixed just by moving to new technology, versus some of these pain points could be organizationally related or they could be business process related, in which case you don't necessarily need to even be looking at new software quite yet. And then the third option is when we are brought in and it's part of either a full digital transformation or a selection project. At that point, the deliverable is going to be far more in depth. We will have established a list of functional and technical requirements out of a new system. We will have done the work, the foundation work in terms of business readiness assessment to design an organizational change management program, because the work that you do to be successful post-go live literally begins during the selection process. The other thing that will come out of there is that we will identify a bunch of recommended pre-implementation or during implementation projects. And one example might be, you need to take a look at your data. You got a bit of a hot mess. Your data is in 17 different places. You've got this one particular type of data. So let's say it's the name of a city that is being held in 3 different databases. There is no consistency. It's just an open field. We're going to need to clean that data. We're going to need to prioritize that data. We're going to need to establish some data management practices. And that is all work that is separate from business process change management and actually selecting and implementing technology. That's a whole other work stream. And so those are the types of recommendations that we'll also come up with that will come out of an assessment.
And when you have those recommendations, does Panorama also provide a lot of those services as well, or like data cleansing and things like that, or have any recommendations on how to do that? Because I know a lot of times, being in IT, you're already swamped and you don't have time to sit and look at spreadsheets and SQL databases to make sure that there's not a typo.
Absolutely. So I will say that anything that we identify and recommend in terms of our clients, we can either do the work for you, we can guide you as you do the work yourself, or we can bring in some third parties. So for example, Panorama is not in the business of doing technical services, but there are companies that we work with, and that their bread and butter is data migration, data cleansing, and data migration. And so we can introduce those third-party resources, and we can either manage them on behalf of our clients, or we can just make a happy handoff and say, go run and do. One of the things that I really appreciate about working for this organization, especially being in the sales role, is that in everything that we do, we tailor it based on what's needed. So I'm not going to go out to my clients and say, based on this assessment, here's what we see from a change management perspective, and here's your change management program, and here's how much it costs. And here's what we see from a business process, and here's what you need to do, and here's how much it costs. And by the way, there's some Ginsu knives also. It's absolutely, we're going to tailor what we recommend and how much we offer to take on for you based on what you need. If you've got a world-class team in-house for contract negotiations, you don't need our help with that. If you've got a world-class pro-side team of change management experts in-house, you don't need our help with that. So we can share our observations, our recommendations, and then you can run with it. Flip side, organizational change management is not typically a core competency with the clients that we work with. And so it may be that they say, hey, we hear that this is important and we're going to need help making that happen. What we do have in-house are world-class change management experts and marketing experts and communications and training and stakeholder coaching experts, so that we can bring to the table directly.
Okay. Now I know that we had a client previously that took over. It was a mom and pop shop, and the son took over and wanted to revamp everything, but he didn't have the authority to do that, and was getting pushback from his father, who had actually founded the company. How would you suggest, or what would you say to them as far as the assessment goes? They're like, okay, we'll do the assessment, but maybe that's it. And I think that's an okay thing, just so that they know where their shortcomings are. But really, to get to that next level in business, you're going to have that change. How do you fight, or maybe fight is the wrong word, but how do you get the person who has majority control over that company to kind of want to move into the future? The benefits of that digital transformation. How would you position that?
So that's a great question, and it's funny because just in my extended family, they're farmers, and the parents were really holding on. They weren't ready to pass it on to Junior, and they had never left Saskatchewan, Canada. And then finally, in about their mid-70s, which means their son was in his mid-50s, they actually took their very first trip away from the farm. It took that long to hand over the reins. So completely understand it. There's a couple different things. So we can come in, and we are that objective third party. We can share our observations, and in everything that we do, we're going to document. We're not just going to say, you guys are terrible and inefficient. We're going to say, here is what we see. Your inventory turns look like this. Here are some benchmarks from your industry that you could achieve, and here's how you could achieve them: through changing this process, through changing this technology, through training your people, etc. But really, what we will find, whether it is to put together an argument for a family or for a parent company that could even be global, which we deal with fairly often, is putting together a business case and saying, here are the pain points that we see. Here are the opportunities to reverse those pain points. And again, it's that three-legged stool, the people, the process, technology. So let's say that a current pain point is it takes weeks to close month end. And part of the problem is that every time you try to run those reports at the end of the month, the system just can't handle the transaction volume, and it stalls out, it freezes up, it falls over. And so that is just a serious, serious pain point. Well, so that's an easy fix. Any new system that you choose, you're going to choose to have the ability to handle the transaction volume that you are going to put through the system. But there could also be pain points in terms of efficiencies that are more people or process related. So let's say, for example, you are getting conflicting leadership decisions and opinions because everybody's coming up with their own data. They've all written their own access databases. They're pulling reports. But it turns out everybody is pointing those access databases at different sources of data. And at the same time, you have a system in the house that could actually run the report and give you quality data in the first place. That's a change management issue. That's a training issue. And so part of what we want to do when we're working with folks and helping them decide what should we take on now, what should we take on in the future, is putting together that business case of observations and recommendations of how to fix them. And for most of our folks, very rarely is it going to be a full-on big bang. You came to us with a problem, and your answer is just to slam in a whole new system. Vast majority of the time, it's going to be a phased approach in some, if not all ways, whether from a technology standpoint, you're going to start with your back-end financials, and then you're going to bring on additional functionality in later phases of the project, or maybe you're going to start with one location, do a big bang in that one location, then gradually bring on other locations. Maybe you're just going to take a pause and say, there are a couple of work streams that we could really work on improving and re-engineering before we even think about technology. Let's sort that out over the next 6 months, and then let's revisit the technology in the future. All of those different approaches are what we are going to be looking to assess and recommend. What makes the most sense for you based on where are you as an organization? Because one of the things to think about, you've got the overarching mission and vision of the company and how you want to add value for your clients, but you are not working in a vacuum. So if we have someone come in to us and say, listen, month-end financials are just a bear, and sales is really complaining. They want to send a location. They all want to get on Salesforce, but Salesforce is really expensive. And at the same time, we just agreed to buy a new location. And our chairman is looking to retire in the next 9 months. When we go to work with a client, whether it's a mom and pop where they're looking to hand on to the next generation, or it's a multi-conglomerate, we really need to understand what is the overarching environment that we're working on. What are all the conflicting or parallel projects that are underway, so that we can make sure that our recommendations acknowledge that and are doable and feasible in the short and the long term.
That was a mouthful.
I know.
There's so many questions that can just come out of just that.
I know. To put it
So-
this way, the one thing I will tell you, the number one reason, the number one corporate driver that people come to me for is the ability to make better business decisions because they have visibility across their organizations to quality real-time data. If we could solve that one thing, if we could achieve that one statement right there for every single one of our clients, that would have 99.9% of our clients in a happy place. But what is it going to take to provide that is going to be different based on the client.
Right. And I mean, even if their current system, quote unquote, can't do it, there's, I mean, a lot of times there are software upgrades. They're there for a reason. They're there to enhance functionality. They may not be switching a system at all. Maybe they're just getting the new version.
Exactly. And, and so this is the thing, and especially because, my background actually came from working for a software company, is that at the end of the day, upgrades are there for a reason. These software companies want to keep your business. And so they are 24/7, 365, they are taking input and requests from their customer base saying, could you add this functionality? Could you add this field? Could you make it do this way? They are also independently doing their research and development to make sure that their product remains not just relevant, but competitive for the industry that they serve. And what's so interesting is that there's a symbiotic relationship between when you implement a product, how much you take the functionality out of the box, you adjust your business processes to leverage the process as it is facilitated by the technology, or do you say, all right, we want to achieve this process and we want to do it our way, so we're going to need to modify the ERP system and customize the ERP system to do it our way. And there's a real value proposition question to that. And what we find is that if there's too much modification, too much customization of a system, it makes it impossible to take the upgrades. When at the end of the day, if you do, the more that you can use the system the way that it is originally designed, the easier it is to take those upgrades, the easier it is to remain relevant and competitive with the technology suite that you have, so that you're not having to go back, rip and replace, start all over with an ERP implementation, training all your people up. It's a huge investment. So yeah, upgrades are a thing. Anytime we have the opportunity to work with a client, we're always going to take a look at their legacy system and see if there's a way to maintain and get the most value out of that existing investment.
Mm-hmm. And you bring up a good point regarding customizing software. And as much as I can, I recommend against it, and to modify your business processes to fit the software, whether it's your existing software or software that you're going to. And the reason for that is exactly what you said. You can make it nearly impossible or very expensive if you want to upgrade later on. And I think that there's, the differentiating factor in companies is not necessarily the process, like how you pay your bills, right? It's going to be something else, like the quality of your product. That's your differentiator, right? It's super high quality. You can't get it imported from, somewhere else. The only kind of industry that I think that, that comes to mind as far as process goes, where this customization could definitely happen, is could be pharmaceuticals, because there's certain ways you have to mix, chemicals, and in certain orders, and things like that. But I definitely, agree with you when it comes to customization. We want to try and stay away from that as much as possible. Now, when you're doing assessments, how often do you see that as one of the big drivers of a bottleneck inside the company? So the company, they customize a solution when they're small, and then they get bigger and bigger and bigger, and that solution no longer works, but they have made it so that they can't do an upgrade. How often do you actually see that?
So we see that a lot, and there's a couple of things there to unpack. So when you are making a decision, as you're going through an implementation to customize your ERP solution, one of the things that we always talk about when we're in the early days, in the assessment phase of a project, is understanding what people are doing and why. Less about the how, but what are you doing and why? So what am I doing? So an example was worked with a steel distribution company. And every single day they had something they called the dentist report. And it was literally, and I am not exaggerating, there's zero hyperbole, 2 women, 6 hours a day, 28-step process to get evaluation to the penny of every single item in the inventory for this steel company. At the end of the day, when they get a new ERP system, they're going to press a button and boom, it's going to be there. If you took that concept of, we have a process, we are going to customize our system to do that process, over time, there's a good chance, if it's an important and it's a fundamental, essential process, that the new software is going to do it for you. So sometimes what's happening in terms of taking these upgrades, you're actually unraveling difficulty and going to something that's straight out of the box. So the question is, why were you there in the first place? Was it because the functionality was not inherent in the system, in which case, yeah, I understand why you did it. And, I think that what we tell our clients is your goal is to have, no more than 10%. But the expectation is there's going to be some kind of customization or modification of the system to make it fit your business. But it's a symbiotic relationship I was mentioning before between, does the system do what we need to do? And if so, is the how the issue? And if the how is the issue, is that a change management issue? Like, we just need to educate our folks how to follow the system in the way that it is designed, because the end result is achieving what it is that you want it to achieve. Or are you very specifically doing a process in a way that the system cannot support? What we find for the most part is that it's the previous, that it's a way of avoiding resistance when you're going to a new system by making it look, very similar and comfortable to the way it used to look. But you are losing the benefit of moving to that new system if all you do is, we call it paving the cow path, if all you do is build a new system that does exactly what your old one used to do.
I've seen that. I've literally seen people print out screenshots and say, this is what we want our screens to look like. And my first thought is, well, they already look like that.
Exactly.
Why are you going to spend millions of dollars to get the same thing? It doesn't make sense.
Exactly. So yeah, you just really want to have clarity around what is it that you want to achieve, why do you want to achieve it, and then let the system figure out the how and the gap. If for some reason the system cannot achieve what you want for the reason you want it to, that it's a good reason, and we will push back on that as well, that's when you can take a look at customization. It's amazing to me how often we will go in and ask folks, well, why do you do it this way? Because we always have. It's far more common of an answer than you would expect.
Yeah. The thing is that, you have, you said you had some family that were farmers, right? Well, now there's I don't know if like hydroponics, aquaponics. You can grow lettuce in, half the time with double the size. It's pretty crazy. So the ability to change, and the being comfortable stepping away from that tradition, isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's you get better, you can get better results, or you can get the same results but with less effort. I think that's going to be really important. And I think what you're saying is, in the assessment, when you're going through, you're talking to these teams, you're talking to the IT staff, you're talking to the accounting and all the different departments, you're going to uncover that, and see how you can actually improve, make their job easier for them. Because honestly, I mean, I know several people in accounting. I could personally never do it because it seems very, very boring to me. So if I ever had to step in, God forbid, I would just want to click a button. And on the reverse side, I look at code all day, so that's probably very boring for somebody else. But being able to help reduce the amount of manual effort for a job is going to be very important, I think.
Absolutely. And there's a couple things there. So, one, that's what you just mentioned is so important. If you have to repeat it, you should be able to automate it, right? So that's one tenet right there. But the second thing is, talking about how do we set a company up for success in terms of user adoption when they are bringing on to new technology. And, Change Management 101 says, get people involved right up front. So when we do these assessments of the current business processes, we are identifying all the pain points. We are giving people a voice. They feel heard. They get to say, here's what I like, here's what I don't like, here's what I want. But it also is where we start that education process. So much of consulting is just education. It's just letting people know what's possible. What's the art of the possible. So let's say, you've got a process and it is really, really tedious. Well, it's really, really tedious because you're working on a system that's 25 years old. Did you know that moving forward, it's not a 28-step process for two ladies 6 hours a day? All you're going to do is push a button. But let's talk about, in what other ways are you going to be able to use the system to enrich your life, to make you more efficient, make you more effective, and keep all of those folks engaged right up front. And that way they're much more likely to adopt that new system or those new business practices if it's completely separate from technology moving forward.
So really it's regardless of, whether they're looking to do a digital transformation or just pieces, they have to have this assessment so that they have a benchmark on what they're currently doing. And that's what Panorama basically can provide, is you have to do the assessment. If somebody wants to come in and give you advice without ever knowing what you're doing in the first place, I would probably run away, right?
Absolutely. Like I said, it doesn't matter if it's a 2-day engagement, if it's the first half of a selection and implementation project, or if it is a crisis management intervention. At all times, the very first step is to know your customer, get to know them, hear their voices, hear what their pain points are, hear their aspirations and dreams, and then what else is on their plate, so that you can partner with them and advise them and give them the recommendations on how to move forward, whether it's in a big or a small way.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Laura, for your time today. And if we have any listeners that want to do assessments or have them perform for their organizations, what's the best way to reach out to you?
I would say you can contact me directly, info@panorama-consulting.com. You can go to our website, and we've got little call to action boxes everywhere. Just click on it, type in your email address, and we will give you a holler straight away. And we'd be happy to help you with whatever your challenges are.
Perfect. And that's www.panorama-consulting.com, correct?
Correct.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And this has been another episode of The Panorama Angle.